In this worldly life, people are looking for ways to Jannah. And one of the many ways is to help those who are in need. It is very critical nowadays in Malaysia as there is spread of mental illness. According to the 2019 National Health and Mobility Survey mentions that half of the millions of Malaysians suffer from depression symptoms. So how do we play our role to help those who are in need as part of our ceaseless deed? Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To all audience, how are you guys doing? I hope you are enjoying your time, maybe with your family, and maybe you're currently having your dinner right now. I am Fatima NK. We are in a new talk show, Route to Jannah. And I am here with our guest, Anita Abu Bakar. Sis Anita, how are you?
I'm well, alhamdulillah.
That's
how
good.
are you?
I'm good as well. Thank you. You look very good with your purple color.
Alhamdulillah, you as well.
Yeah.
MashaAllah, alhamdulillah.
All right, maybe we shall start first with your background about maybe your professional affiliations. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a mental health advocate and also a social activist, but I'm also the president of MIASA. So MIASA is the Mental Illness Awareness and Support Association. We are a peer support group and also a mental health advocacy group. And I started this 9 years ago. But initially, I started my career as an applications engineer. So I majored in computer information system and I minored in management information system. And then I ventured into corporate banking, investment banking. So I was an investment banker for more than 10 years. And what happened was when I was afflicted with a mental health condition 9 years ago, so that was how I was inspired to then advocate for the cause. Because if you remember 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of talk about mental health. You can't see, there were no posters, saying, if you are struggling with anxiety, these are the helplines, or are you having, symptoms of depression as an example, this is what you do. And understanding and realizing these gaps. So that was how, I thought maybe through my own lived experience, through what I have learned in my recovery process, that I could possibly help other people, to have a better insight and hopefully translate that into a change of behavior and also promoting action. Because as you mentioned, there's a lot of stigma when it comes to mental health challenges and what more people struggling with the condition itself.
Actually, I could relate with the point where you mentioned that 10 years back that there's not so much awareness of mental illness. Because I also have so-called personal experience of my maybe surroundings, my family and friends as well, who also have the mental illness kind of things. So just about, you said just now about how you started the MIASA, right? So how do you persistent, or how do you are able to advocate people? What are the motive actually?
Okay. I think it's really important if you want change, because I have a stake in it, because I want change. When I struggled 9 years ago, I felt truly alone. I felt hopeless in my recovery journey, because when you're struggling with a mental health condition, you don't really necessarily know how to articulate it well, in the beginning, because you yourself, you're confused, right? You don't know what's really happening with you. And especially many, many years ago when there wasn't a lot of awareness on it. And so what happened was, through that, I realized that if a person living with the condition, if we ourselves are not talking about it or not providing that insight, then how can other people understand it better, right? How can people support you better? Because facade-wise, if you look at me, I look normal, as normal as anyone, right? So you don't necessarily see my struggle immediately, so it's not immediately evident to you.
True.
Unless you're with me, day in and day out, right?
Yep.
And for a period of time, then you understand, okay, Puan Anita has certain struggles and she needs a certain kind of support. So because of that, I really encourage other people as well. If you arrive to a point where you are brave enough, not necessarily brave enough, lack of a better word, but you feel that you are ready to share your story, please do, because you don't know, when you share your story, you don't know whose struggles you will be unlocking, because it provides that key, right?
Yep.
Because other people are struggling but they feel ashamed, there's a lot of fear because of the stigma.
True.
And what is the hardest thing about living with a mental health condition is when you yourself internalize the stigma, right? Because
true.
you feel that, the moment you assert your identity, people are going to feel like, she's crazy, or she's going to snap out, or, she's violent, or if she doesn't, for example, the media sometimes or oftentimes we portray people living with a mental health condition inaccurately. So then the public has that perception that, okay, if you don't take that medication, you're going to kill someone, or you're going to harm yourself.
True.
When in actual fact, a mental health condition, in order for you to go through an effective recovery process, it must be a holistic approach to that recovery process. Then it becomes effective. So it's a biopsychosocial and spiritual approach to it. Then only can you become, better again. But it takes time. It's not something that is instant.
True.
Yeah.
I do agree with that as well, because I also have at the moment where my best friend who also suffer with that. So what I can do definitely is to hear and listen.
That's
so
right.
we will be right back for this Route to Jannah after this break. Alhamdulillah, we are back in Route to Jannah. Let's still continue our discussion with Sis Anita. Sis Anita, just now we discussed about the mental illness and how actually it affects you a bit in your professional growth as well. So I would like to know, based on experience, so that we can share with our audience here, about the stigma. So some people who are affected with the mental illness, they don't want to seek professional help because of the stigma of the society in Malaysia. So what are the causes of the stigma?
Okay, I think one of the biggest reasons that hinders a person from seeking for the help is when you internalize the stigma yourself, as I mentioned earlier, because we all know what is the public perception when it comes to mental health challenges, right? People think, as I mentioned earlier, people think you're crazy, you can potentially be violent, you're not able to, work or make good decisions or effective decisions, you're weak-willed. And it's always also linked to having a weak faith, as an example, right? It's always linked to religion, or it's always linked to faith. And because of this understanding, and we know that this is the perception of the wider community or public, this is why it becomes really difficult to reach out for the help. So when you do that, then it reinforces stigma. So then of course people feel the shame and people feel afraid of it, right? And so these are, I think, some of the reasons of that. And then because of that stigma as well, family members play that role, play that important role as the supporter, but then what happens is they become dismissive, especially when the person is struggling, are children. Because children, when they battle a mental health condition, it doesn't look like how, an adult goes through it, because they don't really understand it, right? So it could manifest into physical symptoms. It could manifest as an example in irritability, or, mood swings, right? Or in tantrums, or not wanting to go to school. But it can also manifest in physical conditions. So it could be frequent headaches, frequent stomach aches, right? Back pains, aches. So it could be physical pain as well. And so because of the lack of knowledge, then parents feel like, oh, Juanita, my child is lazy. She or he doesn't want to go to school. When in actual fact, it's actually a manifestation of their mental health struggles. So I think it's very important for knowledge it must begin with knowledge. So we say knowledge is power, right? Because knowledge is transformative. And so that's why, shows like this, for example, it plays a big role because we're providing that education to the public, and it translates to that understanding. And so parents now know how to support better. So knowledge is truly important. And not downplaying the symptoms and the struggles of people that live with mental health conditions. So if I may say, if movies and dramas and music videos that we produce, have people with lived experience within the task force, right? So that you can have an accurate portrayal. If you want to do movies of people struggling with mental health conditions, do it where you talk about the depth of their struggles, and it ends with a successful story, because right now it ends with tragedy. Right? It ends with violence. It's always negative. Right? It's always crime, it's always violent, it's always tragedy. When in actual fact, like me as an example, I live with a mental health condition, right? And if I'm able to show and share people that you can manage your symptoms, that you can be able to, be a mom and work and thrive even with the condition, then it provides hope to other people that, maybe if Puan Anita can, then there is a possibility that I can too. So that is the message of hope that we want to portray to the people out there.
True. Like, in this life, we need like a role model.
Yes.
Whenever we are in this situation, we are in the same boat with her. Oh, she got this mental illness.
Right.
So we feel connected a bit.
Exactly.
Right. So
exactly.
This is very, very
and I think it's also important when you share your story to be relatable and candid, so that people when they listen to your story, they feel connected in the sense where, oh, she went through the same thing that I'm experiencing now. So if she can overcome it, then maybe I can too. So again, providing that possibility, a way out for people that are struggling. Because when you're struggling with a mental health condition, typically what you feel is you can't recover, that there's no hope, right? Because you don't know how to articulate it. People can't see your challenges. And because of the stigma, you then feel ashamed to even, say that these are the things that I'm going through. Maybe, I find it difficult to breathe. I find that, I feel that I'm a burden to people, or I feel like, maybe dying is even better. So these thoughts that come in, you feel afraid to share it, but actually, in actual fact, if you do that, then it helps the other person to understand and support better. So this is what needs to happen.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I believe that throughout the stories, that we are able to share the awareness, to break the stigma. That is why very important for us to listen to stories, and if you have the experience, to share the stories as well. So apart from the awareness, sis, what are some of other maybe steps to end the stigma?
Okay, so one of the things, at Miyasa, obviously, because we're stigma busters, right? So this is very much big in the work that we do. So what we try to do as much as possible is always to run campaigns. So we do a lot of national campaigns, so that people can participate within the campaign to actually share their stories or to advocate for certain issues within the mental health space. So one of the campaigns that we've run, we call it #UnlockYourStory, and 2 is also #ZeroCoercion. So zero coercion is when when we talk about people living with a condition, there's a lot of forced treatments, or being forced into certain things. It could be being forced into admitting them into a hospital as an example, or forced into taking the medication, or forced into a certain type of treatment, or even you feeling that you know more than the person who is actually struggling. That in itself is also coercion. So it's very important to provide these campaigns so that you can educate the public about the truth and what mental health is about and not about, right? So these are some of the ways that you can do that. And another big thing that we do as well is advocating for policy changes, right? Because of course we have the Mental Health Act, right? Mental Health Act 2001, and we also have the Mental Health Regulations 2010, which helps to regulate the Mental Health Act. But when it was created, there wasn't participation from people living with the condition. So can you imagine? You're providing a policy and a guideline, but then the people living with it, they're not actually having a voice. So we do advocate for policy changes as well. And I think what is currently big happening right now is the decriminalization of suicidal attempts. Because at the moment, kan Fatima, people that attempt suicide, if you don't die via the suicide attempt, you are being put into prison, or you're being penalized. You've got to pay a fine.
I've heard that.
Yeah, so imagine you are struggling with a mental health condition. So this means that you're ill, but instead of treating you as a person who is ill that needs treatment, support, and help, they treat you like a criminal, right? So advocating for policy changes and amendments are really important.
Okay, thank you, Sis Anita, for that. So we will be right back after this break. To Jannah. Welcome back to Road to Jannah. Sis Anita here. We want to have a discussion about the Miasa.
Yep.
Right. So despite of the Miasa, you found Miasa, and also you want to ensure the consistency to help those mental illness, right?
Right.
So how do you see the Miasa's role to help those inmates despite of the fading awareness of this mental illness?
Thank you for saying fading, because it actually is, and I think it started fading the moment the government announced of the endemic phase, that we were going to, move into the endemic phase, and that was my fear, my personal fear, that the moment that we moved to the endemic phase, that it would stop or lessen the momentum, because during the pandemic we were all talking about mental health. Even the general public, thank you very much, guys. You guys really leverage on social media. You guys were sharing so much on mental health, the tips, the various channels that people can go to reach out for the help. But then what happened was, once we hit the endemic, then we think that everything is resolved, right? It disappears and no one is struggling. In contrary, there are more people struggling today. Okay,
because of financial.
There are a lot of factors. One, the pandemic hit us, so a lot of people now find themselves in poverty, right? Poverty, of course, because imagine during the time 600,000 people from the M40 group fell into the B40 group, right? So now we're talking about financial struggles. And then people during the pandemic lost jobs, reduction in income. So now you find yourself in a pile of debt that you don't know how to repay, right? And then a lot of people lost loved ones, right? And you weren't able to be with your loved ones during, their end of the time, right? So what happened was, a lot of people are now struggling with grief. And then a lot of people are now finding themselves in being diagnosed with a mental health condition, and also more critical conditions, because a lot of people have experienced COVID. So what we're really hoping, in order to maintain the momentum, is to continue doing this work, right? So if you're sharing, continue sharing. If you're sharing either the social media handles or sharing your story, please continue to do it, because unless the 33 million Malaysian populations, if they haven't heard of it, continue doing your job, because there is going to be someone out there that needs to hear your story and will find it helpful when they hear that. So I think that's really important. And of course, in order to keep the momentum as well, is to continuously normalize this discussion. Normalizing it is very important, because you need to take away that shame from it, right?
I see. It's like we have a chit chat with a colleague, like, how are you doing today?
Right, exactly.
Are you okay today?
Right, but knowing how to respond effectively. Right? Because you want it where, when that person says, I'm not okay, how do you respond to that, right?
Okay, that's tricky as well.
Right, because you want to be responding in a way that is full of empathy, that is full of compassion, right? So you must know how to respond effectively, so that you don't shut the person off. When the person took maybe courage to just tell you, Fatima, I'm actually not okay. I'm, battling anxiety or depression, or I'm having suicidal thoughts, as an example. And when the person openly tells you this, that means they realize that they're struggling. Two, that they are seeking help from you, but maybe you don't realize that, because it takes, let me tell you guys, it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of bravery to actually talk about it. So these are maybe some ways that we can all do to just keep this momentum. And mental health, guys, it isn't a trend, okay? And it should never be a trend. Like any other condition, it is a medical condition, and people need help, and it must be a holistic approach to that recovery process, inshallah.
Yes, thank you, Sis Anita.
Most
I do
welcome.
agree on that as well, because what mental health patients need is just to listen, right? And also we have to help them as well, as what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said.
من نفس عن مؤمن كربة من كرب الدنيا نفس الله عنه كربة من كرب يوم القيامة.
So whoever help other people who are inflicted with this worldly life, and Allah will help those in the judgment day later. So just don't forget that we have to listen to Allah, because help is to listen, because that is powerful action, and to help is to give hope, because there is always ways to untangle the rope. For additional information on mental health support and also counseling, JAKIM also provides support through the KSK Care Center through the hotline number 03-8870-7519, 7527 or 7528. So till we meet again in the next Route to Jannah episode, trust in Allah, Route to Jannah.